And it's always the question, whenever anybody finds out I'm lecturing anywhere, is it gonna be recorded? It just show up. A lot more fun if you show up. But the lunchtime lectures I did were originally not designed for people to sit in their offices all around campus. They were supposed to come to that room and eat their lunch if a while that happened. But people became so accustomed to, oh, come on. I left kids at the library working and now they're texting me. They know what I'm about to do. They're needy.
Well, Anna, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at our Village Voices. Happy and pleased and honored and all other superlative words to introduce you to my friend Scott Sanders.
We go back a ways.
We do. Before and then after, right? And then a whole lot in between. And his topic, I wrote it down because I wasn't sure my memory would serve me. Obscene in the extreme, the banning of the grace of wrath. Please help me. Story on. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. Can I start out with a question? I guess so.
Jeez.
I have not read the Grapes of Wrath. Is that necessary to understand what you're gonna say?
Well, maybe not. Hopefully it makes you want to read it.
Yeah, there you go. Might stimulate you to read it.
His book report.
What's that? Might stimulate you to
I see,
read it.
even though that's correct.
That was not my question.
So if you don't know anything about me, I work in Olive Kettering Library. And I want to talk to you about one of my favorite books in Olive Kettering Library, which is called Obscene in the Extreme. Now, why is that? Now, when I first began writing this presentation, I thought it was just because there's the code. I thought it was just because Joe Cali did not insist on seeing 2 book reviews from the likes of me before even considering buying the book. However, it came out 2 years after he died. So that's not it. And this is usually where I say, I don't trust my own memory. And so since that wasn't right, maybe it's because of the title, worthy of a tabloid headline, which is a direct quote from a California potato farm. Maybe it's because it's about one of the masterpieces of the 20th century American literature, The Grapes of Wrath. And the people who didn't want you to read it. And maybe it's just because I ordered it for the libraries. Okay. Good old Jim. The author's Rick Wartzman. And already my slides are out of order. Because I want to talk about the original author first. John Steinbeck came from rural Salinas County, or Salinas in Monterey County, California. He was born in 1902. In his youth, he worked a variety of odd jobs, including migrant farm worker, which was an experience that would inform much of his writing. In 1925, he dropped out of Stanford University, moved to New York City to become a writer. But that was without success. He returned to California and he met his first wife, Carol, working as some sort of caretaker and tour guide in Lake Tahoe. And it was in California where he published his first novel called A Cup of Gold, A Life of Sir Henry Morgan, Buccaneer, with occasional reference to history. I saw a subtitle there. It was published in 1929. Hardly anybody paid attention. He wrote a couple more books, and he finally hit it big in 1935 with a classic Tortilla Flat. And next came 3 works of what he called Dust Bowl fiction. They were all featured migrant workers in the center of the story. culminating in, The Grapes of Wrath, which was published in 1931. There it is. A series of investigative articles that he wrote for the San Francisco News in 1936, called The Harvest Gypsies, which included lots of interviews with workers, informed Grapes of Wrath more than any other source that Steinbeck used, and it gave him a whole lot of credibility for writing about life in these migrant camps. So it was released in April 1939, and Grapes of Wrath was more than a hit. It was a phenomenon. It was the top-selling book that year. And so in 1940, it won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction. Critics praised its brilliant storytelling, its raw realism, and the force with which it delivered its narrative. It was also instantly polarizing. Because what do you expect from a book about capitalists and their exploitation of labor in America? One critic claimed the book was too hortatory. I ain't never heard that word. I still don't know what it means. Apart from complaints that Grapes advocated unionization, or even worse, communism. I always go back to communism. Public outcry took exception to the novel's use of profanities and blasphemies and sexual references. In other words, no wonder it was a hit. And not too long after, the hit novel became a hit movie. It was directed by the great John Ford, featured a stellar cast starring Henry Fonda. But controversially, even before it got started, Darryl Zanuck, the executive producer, he felt compelled to confirm the book's veracity, truthiness, if you will, by sending undercover agents to investigate the plight of Okies, which is what they call these migrant farm workers, which came from Okie, to see if it was even true. Turned out that it was true enough for him to go ahead with the film, despite all the red baiting it engendered. And now when you're making a film, it's a little bit more complicated than publishing a controversial book, because there's whole swaths of the country that won't go see it, and even people who own theaters won't show it. Well, the opposition either hardly mattered or made people want to see it even more. General dynamic. It won Ford his second Oscar for Best Director, and Jane Darwell won her only Academy Award in a very long career for her portrayal of Ma Joe. Incidentally, the movie is different enough from the novel that it should never be used as a substitute for a high school book report. I might have a little experience in this one. Yeah, backing up just a little bit because my slides are out of order. So Rick was a journalist before he got into consulting. Wartsman, the author. He's currently the co-president of Bendable Labs, which is based at Claremont University in California. And it's described as a social purpose nonprofit dedicated to, as they put it, helping communities thrive. Rick's latest work came out in 2022, and it was called Still Broke: Walmart's Remarkable Transformation and the Limits of Socially Conscious Capitalism. He got the title for Obscene in the Extreme from, and by the way, this is what Rick looked like when looking. He got the title for Obscene in the Extreme from one of Steinbeck's neighbors, who felt just a bit seen, apparently. There you go. There he is. When W.B. Bill Camp, a giant cotton and potato grower, presided over the burning of Grapes of Wrath, that's what you see happening right there, in downtown Bakersfield, he declared, "We are angry, not because we were attacked, but because we were attacked by a book obscene in the extreme sense of the word." To which I say, yeah, right, Bill. Bill Camp, however, despite this dramatic moment, is not nearly the villain of this piece that Stanley Abel is. Rough, stubborn, thick-necked Stanley Abel, as Rick Wartzman described it in the book. One thing that Rick discovered in his research for Obscene in the Extreme was in every photo he found of Stanley Abel, and there are many, the man never smiled. I think that says something. So what happened on the 21st of August, 1939? Stanley was running the Board of Supervisors meeting. They ran through 46 agenda items, pretty ordinary stuff if you're involved in local government, you know, paving roads and the like. It was Abel who introduced, at the very end of it, an anti-Grapes of Wrath resolution. And you know how these things go, a whole bunch of whereases, followed by a resolved. And so the whereases are basically a list of grievances about he and his fellow fruit growers are portrayed in the book, villainized, if you will. And then here's the money part. Resolved that we, the Board of Supervisors, in defense of our free enterprise and of people who have been unduly wronged, request that the production of the motion picture film Grapes of Wrath, adapted from the Steinbeck novel, not be completed. And we request use and possession and circulation of the novel be banned from our library and schools. It actually wasn't a request. Luckily, the response from the Kern County Public Library, and specifically librarian Gretchen Knief, the hero of our story, was swift. She wrote on the very same day that this resolution was passed to Stanley. I was extremely sorry, both as a librarian of our proud and free Kern County Library and as an intelligent adult reader, when I was handed the resolution banning Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath from our shelves. This is the first such instance of censorship in the entire history of our library. I realize this resolution may have been sprung on the board, and in fact it was. They were absolutely blindsided with it. But the thing that worries me is that it could happen here, which I think is a direct reference to another California novel. It Can't Happen Here by Sinclair Lewis. If you've never read that, it's become absolutely relevant in the last 10 years because a man who runs for president turns our government into a dictatorship. Okay, back to she goes on to say, banning books is so utterly hopeless and futile. It's easy to think to agree with. Ideas don't die because a book is forbidden reading. If Steinbeck had written truth, the truth will survive. If he is merely being sensational and lascivious, then the book will soon go the way of all other modern novels and be forgotten. Kern County need no defense. We can honestly look the world in the face and say we have done more than the rest for the migrants. And for that reason, all adults in Kern County should have the privilege of reading the Grapes of Wrath so they can go out and tell the world where Steinbeck has erred. Will you not, therefore, in the interest of a healthy and vigorous democracy, please rescind today's motion when you meet on Monday? Such action would help establish anew the intellectual and moral independence of our county as a whole, and of our board and our library in particular. I like that one a lot. And having said her piece, Gretchen did what most librarians I know would do. She went back to work. So while Abel and the other community leaders did their suppression of Grapes of Wrath through the mechanism of county government, other residents of Kern County countered the book with their own works of fiction. Steinbeck's neighbor in the town he lived in was called Los Gatos. Novelist Ruth Comfort Mitchell wrote a book called Of Human Kindness in response in 1940. Judged clunky and syrupy by Rick Wartzman. So he read this book, the process of working on this. The book centers on the upright Banner farming family, multi-generations in California. And the parade of ridiculously shallow characters that prey upon them for 32 chapters. They all come from somewhere else.
Mhm.
Now, my favorite one, although I've never seen it, is a 3-reel color film that was produced depicting happy, well-fed farm workers called Plums of Plenty. A title that never ceases to amuse me, as you probably heard. Now, I'm not going to talk any more about Rick's book in case you want to read it. But what I do want to do is move on to what people have become accustomed to me talking about, and that's Antioch College in Yellow Spring. In November 1939, the Greene County Library Board voted 4-3 to ban the novel from its shelves, declaring it unsuitable for its patrons. The Springfield Sun described it as the first such action by an Ohio. Enter Paul Bixler, someone some of you may have actually known, or maybe gone to school with his kids. As you can see, he was a librarian at Antioch College for nearly 30 years. And so he was the head librarian at the time, and a week later, he issued the following statement. Since it has been human nature since Adam to eat of forbidden fruit, doubtless a number of youngsters as well as oldsters are now looking for copies of the Grapes of Wrath, a book which they never thought of reading until it was banned by the Greene County Library Board.
Yes.
It is a first-rate novel, it says. Some think the greatest in 10 years. It is patriotic. It is thoroughly American. It deals with traditions in American life as old as the Declaration of Independence. Here is a book that several million people have already read. Many millions more will read it in the future. And tens of millions will see it in a few months in motion picture form. But by a majority of 1 vote, the Greene County Library now has to say to the public, never mind how valuable the book is, you can't read it here. That is the way libraries commit suicide. He then quotes from the American Library Association, describing it, by the way, I love this, as one of the most conservative organizations in the United States.
Mm.
How many more?
Apparently not. All things in transition at all times. And its newly issued Library Bill of Rights, which came out in 1938. This is the pre. Today, indications in many parts of the world point to growing intolerance, suppression of free speech, and censorship affecting the rights of minorities and individuals. And then here's Paul Bixler's kicker. Because of the present situation in Greene County Library, there's our library. And here's the article. Because of the present situation, the Antioch College Library will gladly lend a copy of the Grapes of Wrath to anyone in Greene County who wishes to read it seriously. Now, once upon a time, academic libraries did not share their resources with anyone who wasn't their faculty, staff, or students. What are you doing in my library? I'm really glad I don't work in that era, but I went to school in that era. And if you wanted to use somebody else's library, you needed a letter of recommendation from your own library director. He still might not let you in. It's how things went. So it's one of the things that says this is a fairly dramatic statement, especially from an academic library. And here's the way he finishes up. Democracy is a fine thing. We all believe it. Yet censorship is the very negation of democracy. The two cannot be made to fit together, he said, even by a Philadelphia lawyer. I still don't know what that means. Now, the little thing on the part, the unidentified clipping, I found that in Antioch, Indiana. I wish I knew where it came from. It's only a fragment because there's clearly more that we don't have the rest of. The nature of archives. Anyway, this little clipping really piled on the situation. Since the Greene County Library asked for it, I just love that, by banning the book, there is nothing to do but give more publicity to it. This account of the migratory workers has become probably the most widely discussed book of the year.
Mm.
And it has aroused public criticism, in quotes, in other places, as well as influential quarters, in quotes, in Greene County. But it is difficult to accept the statement given out by the president of the board that suppression of the book is a private matter on our board. This really bugs me. You are the board of a public library and you have a private matter? So they're not telling you why they have decided to ban it. Now, this disembodied head is an Antioch of Lincoln Gibbs, who taught English literature. And it was made in the old Antioch Bronze Art Foundry by a guy named Amos Mozzolini. That's why there's a little thing around the bottom that says that. So Gibbs, a very traditional, buttoned up, scholar of English literature, the only male member ever in the Yellow Springs Shakespeare Reading Club, and honorary at that. I found this item in his biographical file that he gave courses at what they called the YWCA Free Time School. So adult and continuing learning, right? And so his course was called the Free Time English Literature class. And I don't know if you can see this list, but you have 1 through 10, the topics that they'll talk about, and the 10th one says present day fiction. And I think it goes on to say members of the class are invited to contribute which book we're going to talk about. And so I think the following statement of Gibbs tells me they talked about the Graves of Wrath. So he called the suppression of the book a grave mistake, adding, it is rough, vulgar, and blasphemous, but a realistic novel has to be. And I like this part. It is no worse than Shakespeare, which people don't object to principally because they do not understand it. He goes on to suggest that there isn't a single word in Grapes of Wrath that isn't in King Lear. So I've got to check on that one. And I know some Shakespeare scholars. They'll confirm one way or another. So what happened next was Bixler's public stance on the Grapes of Wrath launched him into the national spotlight as a leading figure in intellectual freedom, and especially beginning in the 30s through World War II, and then absolutely into the McCarthy era, intellectual freedom becomes a critical issue, especially among libraries and librarians. And so soon he becomes the secretary of the Intellectual Freedom Committee, newly established at the ALA, and edited its newsletter. And you can see it started kind of modestly with the mimeograph there, but pretty soon it had its own letterhead. And so this is what I knew about Bixler, when I got there, was that he was this, powerhouse of intellectual freedom, and was constantly sought for advice and for speaking on these issues. And of course, these issues are going to keep coming up, but Grapes is where he got his start doing this. Okay. Well, in spite of so much praise for Steinbeck, there's the wrath. The millions of copies sold and still selling, the aforementioned Pulitzer for the book, and a 1962 Nobel Prize in Literature for the writer. Opposition to both has never gone away, although the arguments have changed. Now they just say that the most significant American writer of the 20th century simply couldn't write. In 2022, for instance, in one of the final columns of his long career, the late Terry Teachout, who was the drama critic for the Wall Street Journal, wrote in the Weekly Standard. Don't know the Weekly Standard, it is a right-wing rag. And I first met one of their reporters who came here in 2007 to dance on the grave of Antioch College. I spent 3 hours with her and she used nothing. It was absurd. Anyway, Terry Teachout said in one of his last columns, hard as it is to imagine today, there was a time when second-rate propaganda pushers such as Lillian Ellman and John Steinbeck, such two gigantic figures, my God, were widely regarded as major writers. No, Terry, it's actually not that hard at all. And you know what else? You can still borrow our copy of Grapes of Wrath. Oh, wait, make that 6 copies.
Nice.
All right.
One of them is Spanish. Thanks very much.
Oh,
Oh.
God.
I wanted to leave room for discussion.
Mhm.
Yes.
So I have a question about, and you may or may not know the answer to this. I'm under the impression that a lot of people who ask to ban books have never read those books.
It's generally true, I think.
And so how about the people that you mentioned that wanted to ban books?
Well, in terms of the case back in Kern County, it's pretty well documented in Wartsman's book that there was the meeting that we talked about where they passed the resolution, and then Gretchen Knief says, you know, and we'll rescind it next week. And so the book really only takes place over the course of a week, and that next meeting is very well populated with all kinds of people with all kinds of opinions. And at one point, Stanley Abel is challenged. Have you read the book? And of course, he admits that he hasn't, and he doesn't need to. And another guy actually is like, here, let's you and me read the book out loud together in front of everybody. You know, I'll take a paragraph of you, and they wouldn't do it. And so I think it's very typical of a banner of a book is that they don't need to know what's in it, they just want to know. And it's
What do you think is the motivation for that?
big word.
What do you think is the motivation for that? Is it power or is it?
Well, that could be certainly a component for someone like Abel, who was now in the case again of Wartsman's book and the people who were offended by it in Kern County, they used the salacious aspects of the book as cover for I don't like the way I was portrayed in it.
Mhm.
I and my friends. Because one of the things that interests me about Grapes, which I didn't understand when I read it before, was, you know, it's written in the county, you know, where it takes place, because Steinbeck lives where it all happened. Which gives it more credibility. Not that I questioned it back at that time. But it's fairly typical. So I love books, but I like movies even more. And so one of my favorite movies is called The Life of Brian. It's the Monty Python treatment of the life of Christ. And it was absolutely reacted against by, there was a moral majority organization in England called Points of Light or something else. And what they never understood because they hadn't seen the film was that the movie is not really about Christ at all. It's about the rest of the Holy Land mistaking poor Brian for a Messiah. And what little is in the film about Jesus of Nazareth is straight scripture. But they reacted against it, not realizing that it wasn't actually blasphemous. Which was clear evidence that they hadn't seen the film, that they weren't going to see the film, so maybe exercising power is part of that. You know, I find people that have some sort of weird moral ground to stand on, based on their beliefs. It's usually actually not based on much. The book has been banned and unbanned and banned and unbanned. Oh, in the Wartsman book, in the
How about Green County?
in Greene County, yeah, you can borrow it from Greene County again. I don't know the outcome, but from what I read to you, they must have been thoroughly embarrassed. And all it would take really is a change in the board members. And maybe there was a Gretchen Kadif type on the library crew. And you know, for my purposes, it doesn't really matter how long the book was banned. It turned out to be very important for the career of our library director. So I've always appreciated that aspect of this.
Cause I know I wasn't allowed to be in the 10th grade,
Right?
and, not because the school wasn't, my parents were.
Do you think they'd read it?
Their transition, but
Right?
I remember wanting to be there to read the book.
Mm,
I did the same thing because I used the movie.
Yeah, right. I went to the principal at the time and said, I wasn't one of those books that I do in Culture, because I wrote a report on the Great Depression. And really, that I could get to the exam, but she made me read it in front of the class.
mm,
And I was very shy back then, very different thing to stand up there, everyone knowing I was. The kind of that was my, I was doing it all.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of single out.
Yeah.
Before you got here, several of us were discussing having read it in high school. And it was so edited that the content was totally unrelated to the real book.
And on a reread of it recently, there was, the sexual material was more sprinkled. I'm sorry, it was just much more
Well,
sprinkled.
no apologies necessary, you're right.
This was really, about the economics of what was going on and how utterly devastating it was when there was absolutely no social safety net whatsoever to catch you.
That's right.
And you were in real danger of starving and, you know, seriously not having enough to get you where you were going and so on. The interesting thing is that the book starts out in Oklahoma. And one of the things that's happening is that the tractor is, you know, becoming more ubiquitous, so that there's a man who's working for a company who has a tractor, and that tractor can do a lot more work than, you know, a man with, you know, horse and plow or whatever and stuff like that. It means that this is why tenant farmers were being kicked off the land, because the companies were buying the farms and putting men on tractors. And when, as I recall, Jode or somebody is talking with the man in the tractor as to how much money you're making and so on, but you're putting people out of work. The other big thing, and I mentioned this to you, I was the one who told you, that really came out in this read was how migrants or immigrants were treated, because boy, the moving, when there was economic turmoil and everybody was fighting for their fair, you know, for a share of something, it was really, the migrants were not welcome at all, and boy, it's, you know,
There's a really dramatic scene where starving migrants watch their bosses destroy fresh produce because they can't sell it.
and just really the price of the food. You also, just how they flooded Oklahoma with all these leaflets just saying California is the land of plenty and so on. And the Jodes just feel that they're going to go out there and get their fair share of it, not realizing that everybody's out there and that the fruit seasons are only lasting in the terms of the harvest for a matter of weeks. So you've got to move and move and move and move.
So where he goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got to go where he need.
Yeah, I was under the impression though that it was, at least, you know, when I was in junior high school in the 60s or something, that it was pretty widely read because it covered English, it covered history, it covered, you know, a social phenomenon that went on during the Depression. But boy, did I ever read a censored version of that one. And again, I went to high school, junior high school in New York City. And man, there was some stuff in there they were not gonna let us read. I mean, not gonna let us touch, you know?
I think the Kansas City, Missouri library system was the first in the country. To ban it, you know, independently of the Kirk County. What Kirk Board of Supervisors. Again, and harping on its vulgarity. But. So is King Lear, right?
Well, you know, by the way, does anyone here remember that final scene in the book?
Well, I did.
The final scene,
Oh, yeah.
the final scene in the book is when Rose of Sharon has given a stillbirth. She's had a stillbirth, so she's lost her baby, but she's still a lactating mother. And the Jodes, in terms of just trying to find shelter from the rain, go into basically a boxcar and find an old man and his son there. And the son says, "My father is starving." And Rose of Sharon's mother says, "Would you help this man? And I'll leave you." And Rose of Sharon says yes, and they are left alone so that she can basically nurse this man. It's like, wow. Wow,
It's one of the things that people thought were obscene.
the real desperation.
And there are still lots of people that think nursing is obscene.
Mhm.
That's great.
Was extremely.
What impresses me,
humanitarian.
I can remember in high school, not ever reading Steinbeck as assignment in school, but sort of learning that Hemingway and Steinbeck and Faulkner were like big three writers. So I was interested. And I remember reading Great as a Rat, and I don't remember, I mean, I'm a high school student. I don't remember anything being titillating. I remember things like repairing the Ford when it broke down.
Right.
And, you know, just little bits and vignettes. So it's interesting to me that the things that people worried about probably weren't what was making an impact on a lot of the people that were reading.
Or you didn't read the real book. You
I
read-
think I read the real book. I mean, this was in
Could you repeat what you were saying?
what?
Could you repeat what you were saying just now? I didn't hear.
It's really got the last
I
scene.
thought I heard you.
No, I was just commenting
Oh.
on the end of the book, which,
Yeah,
after all, the inhumanity of much of the book eventually that end with like the true humanity. of
that's actually a beautiful point to see.
Yeah.
You know,
that.
if you just open your mind to it.
Well, anytime a book that's written, that's offered to its leadership, that asks the question, why? Or is it something I participated in or causes people to think? That's when other people want to downplay that, want to put it away and say, this is bad. This is horrible, you can't. And always, as you mentioned, then players go and say, well, don't tell me I can't do that. Maybe it's something I really want to do. And, there's power in it.
Yeah.
More expansive view of provocative.
When the film came out, the Soviet government acquired a copy to show how badly, you know, American management treats its workers.
Mhm.
And one of their first screenings, the audience was like, wow, they have cars. And I'm like, well, that's not gonna work. So they shelved it just as quickly as they showed it.
Mhm.
Because as bad as things were for the Okies, they had transportation.
Can you give us an idea of what kind of differences between the book and the movie?
Well, one of the big ones is the scene that she just described out of that.
Is it in that way?
You know, the book was really good, and you want to know something, I personally am illiterate, so I get these things out of the library. on audio, on audio, and they're meant to you by an actor who does a really good job of the intonations. And I can walk around town and read a book, and I'm very serious about it. I don't know which library I got it out of. It might be audiobook, Green County, Dayton, whatever, but on the other hand, it's a book worth reading. It's, because it actually was history. It was a history that's
Mhm.
actually hard to describe.
No, it's based on real hard journalism.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the narrative is interspersed with, really direct commentaries by Steinbeck, in Steinbeck's works.
Mhm.
The inter chapters,
That's right.
which were especially, regarded as, left-wing propaganda, but he was just simply reporting the news.
Yeah, that's true. There were like these essays in between the story and stuff that we just.
He did that a little bit, it needs to be this too.
About the man in the tractor may have come from one of those essays and so on, but again, it is kind of like what you're saying, is was reporting interspersed between the story of the Jones family that went from Oklahoma to California, and boy, they had a hard time, man, they really did. And
But before I started, I was talking about going home for my 4th high school reunion a couple of weeks. And I got toured by middle school, and then I stopped seeing my mother. And one of the things that happened between the tour and seeing her was hearing from our docent that for the first time that anybody can ever remember, the upcoming Wyoming high school levy might not pass. And so I stopped in to talk to my mom. I told her what the docent told me, and she said, "Yeah, school's too woke."
Wow.
Huh?
What did you say?
Too woke. And so I decided to play along, and I said, "Yeah, they got gender neutral bathrooms now," which they do. It was beautiful new renovation they had done. But my big response to her was, "Do you have any idea how many banned books they had us reading?" Including Graves. And so, woke, the pejorative of the 21st century, that's the version of it in the 1970s. Is, reading books that are banned by school systems and libraries.
Mhm.
How's it work? Something that bothers you bothers me, right?
I thought that's what schools were for.
Yeah, people are crazy now. Yeah, more comfortable with their opinions than, anything else. Well, this was fun. Thanks for
Yes,
having me.
thank you, Scott.
Now, we only have one comment, but.
Nice.
Rebecca.